So today I'm going to focus more kind of on the why of data standards and talk a little bit about it, but I feel like the metadata talk is going to be more specific on like what those maybe entail, but why they are important and why we sometimes email you consistently because we need to figure out what was actually meant by something. So I am going to give an introduction today that's more specific to the OTN data center. And then also as well, kind of the role that we play in relation to ACT. So at the OTN data center, we have a mix of biologists, computer scientists, data management professionals, and we all do the work of receiving and aggregating all of the data that's generated by all of you, and from very differently designed and executed projects, and from places all around the world. So we run them through quality control procedures to make sure that they're accurate and fit to be used as source data for information that's shared with other researchers. We build reports and detection extracts for researchers to take back and analyze. We give the researchers a full accounting of everywhere their animals have gone across all the compatible listening stations in the OTN database ecosystem. We adapt and extend the OTN data system to accommodate new technologies and animal tracking. And the goal is making sure that we can continue to hold like the new and upcoming data in the proper context of older and historical data, and that everything can kind of work together. We also design and curate a mapping for this sort of data to larger international databases of animal presence, like the Ocean Biogeographic Information System or the Global Biodiversity Information Facility. And the data center is always growing, but I believe it is 11 of us. So we really can't do that by ourselves. And that is why we have these, or we're lucky to work with these independent communities who have their own resources and autonomy, but then do things kind of in the same OTN formatted way. And for us to be able to have groups like that, we have to make sure that what we are doing is well documented, standardized, and published so that it can be made repeatable by these independent people managing regional nodes and data partners like ACT. So when you register a project with ACT, you and your research are then connected to not only the researchers within the same node, but with the global community. And as you know, we've been talking about over these few days, there are many benefits to this. Your data can be cross-referenced with all the other OTN held data. And this is something that Angela will be speaking about a little bit more later today. We offer various tools to work with your acoustic detection extracts, and Bruce will be talking about one of those tools later today. And your data is quality controlled and assured. It's housed in an internationally recognized secure storage system. And then we also provide these single entry points into a global data system. And so for us, having standardized data and metadata is critical so that your data products can remain valuable and be maintained over time. And then just a little bit more of the background of the OTN data center. It is overseen by the OTN International Data Management Committee. And this is a committee that is composed of data scientists and marine policy experts from North America, Australia, Europe, Africa, and South America. And the members of that committee is published on our website. But their role is to ensure that our data management model continues to be relevant to the needs and timelines of the global communities, and is implemented and operated reliably and efficiently. But for the team here at ACT and for us at OTN, we need to make sure that we are getting the proper metadata from researchers in the proper format so that any of this can really function. So this has already been mentioned a bit as well, and most of you, I'm sure, are aware of this, but whether you're submitting to ACT or OTN, the first thing that we always need is project metadata. And this is just so that we can establish your project in the database. This information can be updated at any time but it tells us, you know, the name of your project, the abstract, who's working on it, the species you're studying, etc. And so it is used to create a private folder for you on your data portal. And then this gives you a place where you can access and regularly upload your data. And it also gives us a place where we know who can see what's in that repository, add to it, make changes, etc. And then once your project has been created, these are the 3 types of data we are all very familiar with that are required for us to be able to provide a meaningful detection extract. So we need information about the tagging activity, information about the receiver, and information about the detection. And the great thing about the network model is that you don't necessarily have to provide all of those data products to us. If you only have tags out, as long as you have your neighbors who have their receiver deployment information, their detections coming to us, then you still get to know where your tag is going. But when you submit metadata to us, we sometimes will come back to you saying like, what is this length? We don't know what this is. And this is because we use a vocabulary standard, Darwin Core. And this is something that facilitates the sharing of biological information because it provides like identifiers and labels and definitions. So somebody who has, you know, no idea what work you're doing here could look at this data and then have this like standardized definition of what it means when you say that this is the length type that you used in your study. And it can give them a lot more context if they are trying to then work with this data, if the data is public, obviously. And yeah, so when the data is made public, this standardization then makes it easier for users to discover your work, to evaluate it, to compare data sets, and to just make it usable by others or in the future. This is something I just wanted to put in here because I don't know about you, Kim, but this is a question I get a lot, or I get a lot of actually people apologizing for submitting data too much. And I'm like, oh, no, please don't do that. That is what we want. So when to report? Ideally, we want data reported to whichever node you're in anytime a tagged animal is released, and or every single time someone moves or downloads a receiver. You know, obviously this information is critical to being able to match detections. And sometimes there's a bit of a feeling of if you just pop the receiver up, download it and put it right back down, it's fine. You don't need to record that, but that's technically a new deployment. That is information that we want, that we need in order to give all of you back accurate detections. And then as well, just in general, people make mistakes. That happens all the time. If you notice a mistake in your metadata, just let us know. We can fix it, and we can then make sure that there is a accurate copy in the repository that can be used in the future so that mistake also isn't repeated. I showed this yesterday, so this is, I'm not going to go into it in detail, but when you look at this and you see all of the different lines, the partnerships, the regional networks via nodes, this is also why this need for a common workflow and for standardized data is so important, because every single one of those is representing however many people who potentially are just taking data in a way that makes sense to them, which is great. But for us to be able to make it all work together, it has to make sense for everybody, and therefore it has to be the same. So a little bit more just about the nodes. The reason that OTN functions with this node setup is because in the early years, when they started trying to build a global database of biologged animal movement, they quickly learned that everyone is susceptible to Tobler's first law of geography, which is that everything is related to everything else, but near things are more related than distant things. And that is not about the fish that we are studying. That is about the people doing the studying. So researchers tend to be more interested in what's happening nearer to their study area. And then, you know, kind of progressively less interested in what's happening further from it. It's a little bit different. A lot of you work with highly migratory species, so that, you know, you guys have to think about these longer distances as well. But researchers also tend to share views on what should happen with their data with nearer neighbors. They're more trusting of those neighbors to safeguard their intellectual property, and they're more likely to agree on how best to work together to cover more area collaboratively with listening stations. And so this is why OTN really supports this strong regional organizing tendency at a policy level and with technology. So a key feature for us is keeping regional data management regimes empowered and in control of their constituencies' data wherever it's possible. And so to this end, we design our database so that it's easy to maintain your own copy. We started calling the communities who adopted them OTN nodes, and we share on an ongoing basis all of the structure and code that we use to populate and quality control and aggregate our data with partner groups who perform this role for their communities around the world. And by empowering this regional collaboration, each PI can then report their data reliably to their closest collaborators. And then the software takes care of ensuring that they are giving benefit to and benefiting from a global network. The other nice thing about this is that there is a single authoritative repository for you to be able to access your data, which hopefully also makes it easier for you to then update it and curate it. And so because data is infrastructure, and that is one of OTN's focuses, this work also happens at no cost to the regional network. So they gain the ability to match detections the world over and manage the data that's flowing in. And at OTN, we get a new partner, we get new listening capacity, and we also get new insights into the ways that people are using acoustic telemetry. And the other benefit of this node system, so we get to guarantee some uniformity of data quality control and processing for the data that's relayed and shared with the other investigators within the network. So all received data is processed by whichever node manager in the same standard workflow using our quality control toolbox. Data is then double checked by OTN or other node managers alongside the existing aggregated data set. So we use GitLab to track the status of all data submissions in data processing tickets. And so we have these data loading checklists that are specific to the type of data that's coming in. And then within GitLab, it also gives us the opportunity to have discussions about each submission. So if you ever hear something from Kim and you're like, how did she remember that we talked about this? It's because we use this system where we can add these comments in, we can put labels on it to kind of flag things for ourselves and to just make sure that nothing gets lost, even if maybe there's a bit of a time delay sometimes, because that happens. This is a very small photo, but we also have a suite of notebooks that we use for quality control. And so some of the things that our scripts are checking for are, is each receiver deployed in only one place at one time? Because often that's not always the case when we get the raw metadata. Are the detections from a time when the receiver was deployed? Another very important thing to know. Is a tag in no more than one animal at one given time? Again, happens. And was the tag still active and attached to the animal at the time of detection? This is part of why harvest dates are very important. If you know that a tag has been harvested from an animal, we need to know that. I don't know about an act. I do feel like that's something that's often missed or forgotten. And then when you're just like, hey, this tag's in 2 animals, they're like, oh no, we took it out of that one. You're like, cool, great. So yeah, the harvest date column, if a tag has been taken out of an animal, harvest date, excellent. But for these quality control notebooks to be able to work and to be able to flag these errors, we need the data coming in from researchers to be in a standardized format. We have incredible people working at the OTN data center who do wild things I could never imagine. Some of them are in this room. But they can't account for every single possible thing that every single person could ever possibly write. And so for these notebooks to work, they've done a great job of flagging all of these different things, but we also need to make sure there's only a somewhat smaller number of things that they even need to be looking for in these. And then because we want to ensure that all of you are receiving these meaningful data updates, we spend several months aggregating, quality controlling, and data and loading the data before doing our big cross-network matching event, which again, Angela's going to talk more about the cross-matching component of this. We call them data pushes. One is happening very soon. So they happen about every 3 months, and they produce detection extract reports for each tagging investigator that contain all of their detections of their tags across all the compatible networks. And our data center and these workflows were recently Core Trust Seal certified. And so what this means is that the software, database structure, and data pipelines received this certification from Core Trust Seal, saying that we are a reliable repository and archive of scientific data. And then these are the processes that then all of the nodes are using as well. And so the OTN data system itself functions in a connective role. We've centered ourselves in the flow of animal movement data, coordinating the pathway for this data from individual researchers and regional networks and national partners onward to OBIS, the Ocean Biodiversity Information System. And so we can help mobilize data from within our partner nodes to points beyond OTN to do things like fulfilling publication requirements of funders or getting it into places where decision makers can act on it. And so also critical to the data standardization role that OTN takes on, we are also a thematic Ocean Biodiversity Information System node that deals specifically with animal telemetry data. And so in this role, we create standardized public archives for any projects that wish to publish their data into OBIS. So this is the heat map of the OTN OBIS portal's currently published data points across the globe. And if we zoom in along the Atlantic coastline, you can see we have quite a few projects published already. And the first non-OTN data set was published just in 2023. So this figure is complex, not made by me, not followed by me. But this is showing, so at OTN, we will help anyone publish their telemetry data into OBIS. There is a QR code here that takes you to the GitHub repository that explains all of this. It explains the process in detail and it offers some guidelines. But this publication process is another one of our Python-based workflows. And so that means any node manager can run it. And it produces quality controlled project data with decimated detections, station deployment histories, and full attribution for all data providers across all participating nodes. And again, yeah, this can help you potentially fulfilling publication obligations to a funder or to a journal. And yeah, as I said, this may look a little complex, and that's because acoustic telemetry is very complicated by nature, but there are more details on the GitHub repository. So at OTN, we also, and our data systems also support other public data portals such as GeoServer and ERDAP. And all of this support of public data is also to meet the FAIR data principles. So FAIR data are data which meet the principles of findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability. And so there are several options to see your data and metadata in the public sphere. Within OTN's database, some of these options are automatic and some are optional. However, each node can adopt these as they choose. So just like the things that are automatic within the more OTN specific does not mean that they are automatic here at ACT. The OTN data policy is designed to balance the benefits of data sharing, both within the acoustic telemetry community and with the broader public, against the real and practical concerns of sharing sensitive ecological information. And so OTN and its nodes reached a general agreement that animal and tag information should be protected at a higher level than instrument deployment information. However, again, each node is distinct from OTN and has their own data policy. And the data policy of each node is what will apply to the tags that are registered within it. And that policy will also then follow the tag, even if they move into other nodes. The data policy that you agreed to is the only one that you have to think about. And those terms are going to follow your tags across the entire OTN data sharing ecosystem. We are at OTN making some changes to our data policy, and those are that our data is going to be open as default. This is upcoming. This is not a change that has been made yet. And then people will have to request embargoes. But again, nodes do not have to do this. This is individual, like part of the regional decision-making capacity. But if you are curious about the OTN data policy, it can be found on our website. Again, those changes haven't been made yet, but they will be upcoming. And then, yeah, just again, a quick acknowledgement of our funders, our main funder, Canada Foundation for Innovation. And thank you all for listening. If you do have any questions, I'm definitely around. And yeah, thanks. Anybody have any questions?
All right, so next we're going to hear from Joy from FACT, and she's going to be talking about instead of this network-wide data sharing database, where she's going to talk more on a local scale and the type of database that you could have within your lab. If I could figure out where the mouse went.
Thanks, Kim. My name is Joy. I'm from the FACT Network. This is kind of a little bit of a different presentation. I'm going to be showing you a little bit of a tool. So it's set up a little differently. I'm going to show you some screenshots, and then there's like a lot of videos. So let's just everybody cross your fingers that they're all going to work. I'm also going to throw myself under the bus quite a few times to tell you why this whole thing started. So what is the VEMBU? The VEMBU is an access database. It's designed to help researchers organize and manage their acoustic telemetry projects. The VEMBU is a separate program from the node. It does not handle detections, and it is housed on your computer, or if you work in an organization, on your organization server. So this is not cloud-based. It is not connected to everyone else. This is for you, your projects. Want to say again, it does not handle detections or analysis. It's for all the other very nitty-gritty stuff surrounding your project. So over time, projects grow in complexity. I'm gonna start throwing myself under the bus here. Putting on my FWC hat, out of the Tequesta Field Lab, we started doing acoustic telemetry in 2007, 2008. Started with a few receivers, started with a singular project, and this thing grows over time. And we were using Excel to keep track of when receivers were deployed, when they were retrieved, and over time, things become much more complex. So you have multiple projects that come in, you get different grants, you're running different tag projects, maybe different parts of your arrays. We've heard that somehow, sometimes arrays are seasonal. They go in, they go out. You have personnel changeover because who are the people downloading, your receivers? Often it's, the new students that are coming on in, and then you have high changeover of them. So you have data being handed off quite quickly. There are funding issues. So sometimes you get new funding that comes in, you expand your array, you bring the array in. You have equipment issues because receivers and tags are not infallible. Lost or incomplete files. So say, you're bringing receivers in, you're downloading, but you're using a field computer, that field computer breaks, and hopefully you've backed up everything somewhere else, but somehow VRL files have been lost from, 10 years ago. And you have a lot of different type of data files I've put in here. So your deployment metadata, your receiver specs, your mobile coordinate files, your environmental measurements, tag metadata, all of these things, okay? And if those aren't taken into consideration when you start, this is what happens. So there are tools to help you manage your project data. Again, not detections, but everything else that happens. So Amy talked a little bit yesterday about the Fathom software that really handles kind of deployments and retrievals. That's new, that's kind of coming out. I'm going to be talking about the VEMBU, which we developed starting in 2016, 2017, to basically help people, originally within FACT, to basically manage these projects. So what goes into the VEMBU? It ingests metadata. So those are manually entered or updated. So this is it can actually intake your receiver specs to it. I'll show you how that works, or tag specs into it. Information about your stations, receivers, if you have any sort of external environmental loggers or other sort of loggers that you're co-deploying, and tags. Your field data are manually entered in there. So that's when you go out and you deploy and you retrieve. And any sort of maintenance that's needed for those stations, or you can actually move a station within the VEMBU so that when you are trying to go back out, you have the most accurate coordinates. I don't know about you, we have moved stations over time. So it keeps a history and record of that. And there is an organization kind of aspect to it where there's a lot of built-in queries that you can query your information about your project, which I will show. So you can retire equipment. So there are receivers, that you will retire. You traded them back to VEMCO. Over time, we've gone through hundreds of receivers just with an array. So basically keeping track of everything that happened to that receiver. And you can produce field sheets, again, something that I'll show. So what's the connection between the VEMBU and the node? This was one of the big reasons why we did this. One, because our Excel sheet was a dumpster fire, but also there's the way that you collect data in the field, right? You go out and you deploy a receiver, and then 6 months later, a year later, however long, you go in, you go back and you retrieve it. Well, those are two pieces of information that are separated in time. But as Shannon mentioned, that there are templates that need to be ingested into the node. That totally makes sense. But the fact is that I have two pieces of information that are separated, and I somehow have to bring those back together for a single line in these templates. So we kind of thought about the VEMBU as like bridging that gap, because one of the export functions actually exports everything in the templates that you need for the node. So it brings those two together. So if we look at this very lovely arrow, so we start with the raw metadata. That's with what you're doing in the field. You come back in, you can use the VEMBU. Like I said, this is not a mandatory thing. This is a choice that some people have adopted. You can enter it into the VEMBU. You export that formatted metadata. So that's your tags and your deployment metadata. Again, no detections. You put it into your document management system. For FACT, that's Research Workspace. For you guys, that's Matos. And then that gets processed up in the node. So that's kind of where it fits in the line. So we streamlined some of the responses with pre-populated drop-down selections. So one of the first tabs that you would go to when you open up the VEMBU is this section here. So you can add what your project code is, or codes if you have multiple ones of them. You can add in your taggers. You can add in what what was your funding sources for this. And these drop down selections, also like your common name, your species. So that means that when you're populating the other fields, it's going to be a drop down selection for you. So it allows you to personalize, but you don't have to type the same thing over and over and over again. Because when you type it over and over again, you're going to make a mistake. So it just it makes things a little easier for you. Now there is some stuff that's pre-populated within the FACT network. We were talking about people that wanted to do analysis that used bottom type, and it's like, okay, can we come up with some standard terminology that we can use for, say, bottom type that we could share with other people. So some of that's pre-populated, but you can always add to that as well. There are attachment methods that are pre-populated, but you could add your own attachment method on in here. Same thing goes for the type of receivers. So I don't know if you guys were around with, with Delrins or the VR2s, but those are in there, or if it's TX or if it's an AR. I know you could go in and add next tracks if you want to. Is this my first? Okay. So I'm going to get some screenshots. Yes, then I'll go on to the videos. So in here, I've shown under tag metadata, you can actually import your tag specs because we're talking about drop downs. If you import your tag specs, that means when you go in to enter your tag metadata, you basically get a drop down window and all of those are going to scroll down and you just get to select the tag and the fields are going to be pre-populated with your serial number, with your tag type, with your estimated tag life. So you don't have to keep going, like referring to this sheet and this sheet when you're filling out your metadata. Adding equipment to it. So the first thing you want to do with the VEMBU is you want to add your receivers, add any sort of external sensors that you're also placing out there. You can add your stations, and through these little windows that will pop up that hopefully they're big enough that you can see. I am not, as I told Kim, I'm not an influencer. I don't know how to screen capture all that well, so hopefully this turns out okay. So I've entered into the VEMBU here. I'm customizing my values. I'm putting in my array code here, my tag project code. This is the grant because I actually want to track like what receivers were bought under what grant or what tags were bought under what grant. This is my fish is a purple fish. I'm putting in the scientific and common name for it. What my tagging organization is. I had to think about this for a second because I had to make it up. What are the tagging PIs associated with the project? I can put in your taggers. So these are people that might actually be out in the field. And again, you can always update this with it. And now I'm just kind of scrolling over and showing you the other things that are already in there, but you could add into it. So if part of your project, you take blood samples or you do other type of sampling, you can add it there. So then I'm going to add some equipment. That's my receiver. I drop down, select what kind of receiver it is. I can add in when it was purchased, the tag that's associated with that TX. You don't have to fill in all these columns. I'm doing it pretty quickly. And I have my name also. So if it's wrong, someone can come talk to me about it. And now I'm adding a station, station YOLO. When it was established, I can go down there and select how I've actually attached that receiver at that station, the latitude and longitude of where it was deployed. So what I'm showing here too is that what we found is that there are some people that were diving that still just run in feet, but the node requires things to go into meters. So if I put something in feet and then I change it over to meter, it would actually change it it'll convert it for you. So we have everything in meters, which is what we need. I can fill out that information. And again, when you add a station, you only have to, do that once. Now I'm going to add just an external sensor. Sometimes we co-deploy hobo sensors, or sometimes we'll deploy hobo sensors on their own. Like I said, this could be anything that you want. I think that's it for that one. So now we've started with the VEMBU and we've added our equipment and our stations. JK. There we go. Okay, so these are just screenshots if you couldn't see that as quickly of what happens when you're going to go deploy and retrieve. This is based on kind of like a library system. It's like you're loaning a receiver to a station. So when you do that, it creates a unique ID code. And that ID code is actually how you're going to tie that information back when you go back and retrieve it. So here are screenshots of what, if you were to select the deployment, what happens. There is a little bit of QA QC on there. So there are only active stations in here. I'll show you how to retire a station later. But from this drop down, those are going to be all your stations. If you do retire one, it will not be in this list. So you don't have to scroll through 300 old stations that are there. The coordinates will auto-populate. based on the last time that you went to that station. You can change those if you go and change it, and it actually gets recorded as a station being moved. But otherwise it pre-populates all of that. It will also only show the receivers. So when you put your receiver number that's down there, it's receivers that are considered in rotation, which means it cannot be deployed somewhere else at the time. And also it cannot be broken. So these are only your receivers that you would have to be in rotation. So again, you're not scrolling through your 300 receivers that you've had throughout your entire project life. When you go and retrieve, you're going to drop down. You see there's that unique ID, the receiver number, and the station. So you just get to go select that really quickly. And then it's going to pre-populate the fields, which you see on the right-hand side. It's again going to pre-populate those coordinates for you. It does have everything listed out in the formats you need it to, because I don't know about you, but before I started filling out the node formats, I didn't put a T between my date and my hours. We also didn't record hours or minutes, which actually is very, very important. And there are other things that you can put in here too. So they're not mandatory. Anything mandatory for like your metadata extracts are starred, but there's drop downs if you want to put, your battery life in here. We used to love to record battery life. I don't know why we did. If you like to record your pings and your syncs, you can fill those out here just so you keep track of it, but those aren't mandatory to do. You can also add in all your comments here. We did update this so we can have glider deployments as well. So there is, I'm not going to do this in the video, but there is a window that if you have a glider deployment, click the button and you can add your glider deployment. So you're just going to watch me do it. First, I'm going to deploy. I've picked my station. I have picked my receiver. You see the integrated transponder already came up there. I'm adding when it was initialized. If that's of interest to you, that is a column you can fill out when it was deployed or put into the water. If I wanted my battery life in there, you can see those coordinates are pre-populated. So now in this screen, you see that it shows up there. I very quickly went back out and retrieved this receiver. So that was a drop-down window. I just selected that receiver and that station. Now I really have to just fill out those date and times. There are some things that are auto-calculated. Like I said, those coordinates come back up, but I can change those if I want to. I can also put on in here a date that it stopped recording. If I notice I brought my receiver up and the battery died 3 months ago, I can put that information in there. So that handles your deployments and your receivers. Don't do that again. Okay, this is where things get a little bit different from what Fathom does, because Fathom handles those deployments and retrievals. And from my understanding is that they do have the ability to export in the node formats. I feel a little more free to speak here because so I said this handles all the other nitty gritty stuff because there's a lot of other stuff that happens with our arrays, right? We heard about it yesterday about 150-pound blocks getting picked up and thrown up on the shore and all that stuff. Sometimes you have to move a station, all of that. So there is a button for update station status. And so from there, you can, like I said, retire a station. So it's part of an old array or you don't want it. So you can set it to be retired. You can set the retirement date. Again, this is going to keep a record of this all for you. You can also change or say that there's maintenance that's needed at a station. So you went out there and you're like, okay, I downloaded this receiver, but it's actually getting quite covered with sand. The next time we come out here, we need to unbury this base. So you can put in a station maintenance and you can make comments. You can give it a priority level of what needs to get done. This is all going to come out in some queries that are later, and you can get a start date and a completion date to it. So you have those notes that not only is it going to keep a record of what maintenance was needed at the station, but it's also going to produce queries that tell you what maintenance is needed, kind of going into the future or going into the field. It also does the same thing with station attachments. don't know about you, but sometimes for us, we would go out with the best of intentions, like this is the greatest mooring for this site, and no, it's not. So we can change the attachment method. So you can go in and pick that station and say you changed it from a bucket to a piling or something like that. So it's going to keep that history, but it also keeps the most current one to it. So we can also do those with receivers because receivers are infallible, but sometimes. So you can update your receiver status. So there's a receiver maintenance as well. So if you come back in the field, the receiver will download. You click this button and you put your serial number, the date that it broke or won't work, and some comments. And it's going to keep that stored. For us, for a long time, we always waited until there were like 6 receivers that weren't downloaded before we sent them all. We wouldn't do it like one at a time because we don't want to pay for all that shipping, right? So in the queries, this will tell you what is considered broken right now. This also helps keep record of when it comes back, or if you send it and it comes back, you see that there is like, if it's fixed, yes or no. When it comes back, you can click that to yes and put in comments, and comments could be like, needs new hydrophone. So you can keep those records and actually look back and be like, okay, at what stage and what age did these receivers actually need new hydrophones? So it's going to keep that history. You can record when you change your batteries. So again, when's the last time you actually changed the battery in that? I know some people change every single time that they're picking up their receivers. Some people don't, but again, it keeps that history. Sorry, I'll take a little sip before. So I've added a different station here. I'm coming up to update station status. Just use a different tab. I'm going to retire that station. I'm going to add the date that's there. So again, keeping the record of it, but that's not going to drop down anymore for deploying a receiver there. I can always go back and change it. It comes back. There's a maintenance that's needed at that station. That's the station that needs it. And I can put, it hasn't been started yet, so I don't even need to fill it out, but I can write what needs to be done. I think I wrote that one that needs to be dug out. There's even a place you can upload a picture if you were down there and took a picture to it. Now I'm going to do some receiver status. I'm going to change the battery. It's very exciting. Now I'm going to say that the receiver was broken. You can see those drop down. So there were selections of traded back to VEMBU, whatever happened to it. The date, that's the date it was broken. The description, I think, because I didn't know it was going to be here, I said that needed to be bottom painted. That's it was easy. And then when it is done, I can go back in and I can say, yes, it was done. I changed the status back to being in rotation when it was completed. And if I needed to say anything else. Okay. So that was a lot to do with receivers and stations and all that. Now we can talk about tag metadata. So this can ingest your tag metadata. You can, there's actually quite a few tabs, and there are a lot of fields that you can fill out. Again, for the exports that are needed for the node, everything is starred, but there's, we built it for people having a variety of things that they collect. So you can enter information about the tag, the surgery, the animal, any other information. If you have a pit tag, if you have a sat tag, if you took blood, if you did anything else, there are windows that you can move between and select all of them. If you load your tag specs, which would be great, again, you can see the image of the dropdown. So basically you just scroll to where that tag is and you select it, and those fields are going to be auto-populated. So you don't have to go back and remember if it was a 1,000 day tag or a 650 day tag when you're writing it down. And again, your species and taggers are customized from your dropdown, which we saw at the very beginning. I think I've already entered one tag in here. This is just me doing another one. I'm importing my tag specs. Boom, that was it. That was pretty easy. So now I have my drop down. I'm selecting a tag. See, all of that part's already pre-populated. I don't have to write it. It is pre-populated with a Novasi, but one thing I do want to say is that the VEMBU can handle any type of equipment. We're not bound just by a Novasi. If you have low tech, if you have Star Audi, if you have Telmo Biotel, it doesn't matter. All you just have to do it in your drop downs. So here I'm picking up some surgery information. I'm putting it in. Very good. Again, date and time that the tag became active. As Shanna has mentioned that, they're going to look at when that tag was deployed is when those detections start to get matched. I'm going to put in a very clever animal ID here. And I can write comments. I can do whatever I want here. And there you go. And my fish is there. What is it? Okay, now I want to talk about the exports. This is what we've been saying is that you can basically export this and go to and be ready for the node. So from the main page for your deployments and exports, there is a green button that says export the deployment metadata form. It's going to take you to that next screen that's down. You're going to bind it by date. So say you're going to export by month or just since the next data push, you bind it by date, has a drop down for array code because several of us maintain several different arrays or several different array projects. So you can select the code that you want to export to. You're going to click on update and then what's going to actually be exported will pop up like right down there. And then you click export and tells you, and it just a window pops up and says like, where do you want to save this? And you save it on your desktop, whatever. And then you upload it, like I said, for us, Research Workspace or in Matos, and you're done. Tag metadata exports work pretty much the same. From the tag metadata tab, you go to export tagging metadata. Again, you're going to bind it by dates of whatever when the tag was deployed. Click update and click export and then save it. So now you can watch a video of how easy it is to do. So the binding dates are from your retrieval dates. So I should say that. So that's what you're looking at is basically from the retrieval dates. And see, all that information has been placed together on the same line. I have saved it and I'm done. I only had one deployment there. Again, went over to tag metadata. I'm going to think about it for a second. And then it's the same process. Again, these are based on the deployment dates. I'm going to bind it of however what you want to upload. I'm going to pick my code. I'm going to click export and I'm going to save it right there. And then I'm done. Now I just need to take my VRLs and these two and you're uploaded. Okay, so I want to talk a little, so that's a big benefit of the VEMBU, but I want to talk a little bit about the queries because this is where it becomes interesting, not just for the node stuff, but for us. So there's a series of queries that are built in and they're kind of categorized here. So there is a field sheet that's in here that I will show. That was based on what a lot of people take in the field, but it'll actually have like your station, your receiver, your attachment method, because for us, based on the attachment method is what equipment we need to take with us. It'll also add at the very end if any maintenance was needed at that station. So you can refer to that before you go out in the field. There are, if you just want to look at outstanding maintenance needs, you can click on what you need for receivers, what you need at the stations. There are what we call last dates. So if you're looking at when was the date of your last battery change for this receiver, that query will pop up. Date at the last station. So if you need to prioritize where you're going out in the field, you can click on that query and it'll have the last dates anytime that someone's been there. There's, I don't want to run through all of them, but there's, if you want to look at what are your deployed receivers at the time, what are your deployed sensors at that point in time, what are your retrieved sensors? There are histories if you want to look at your station location history. So like how much has this station moved over time? It's going to list every single time you have changed those coordinates. Your attachment history. So if you want to look and realize that, oh, you know what, we always like to start with buckets, but somehow we always end up with piling brackets. That's important to know. And again, your station maintenance history. So if you're thinking like, do I really want to keep this station here or do I want to move it? You can look at that and realize that, okay, well, it looks like every 3 months we have to go dig it out or we have to change something about it. So maybe that's not the best location for that station. You click a button and you get any of your new equipment that's on the shelf. From down below, you have your on-shelf receiver. So say like, okay, I want to do a big, download day. Do I have enough receivers that are on the shelf? And yes, you could go back and you could count them. But you can click that button and that's going to tell you everything that's basically out of the water and ready to go. So I'm going to show, I think, just a few of these in this animation. So I'm going to go to the queries tab. And I think I picked, yeah, that was the field data sheet. So it showed you everything that kind of shows up there, if it's useful. Should have done this one a little slower. So that was the maintenance that was needed on those receivers of the stations. Pick up here, that was the last date, I think, of battery change or last day of the station. These are the maintenance needs. So these queries that seem fairly simple, but and when things are fresh in your head, but again, this is going to keep histories of them. So when your project is now 10 years old, 13 years old, you actually still have that information. I think it went by really quick up there, but there's also a receiver health. So if you click on it, it actually tells you the number of deployments that receiver's been on and the total number of days it has been deployed. That's been useful for us when we're like, okay, do we need to prioritize which receivers are going to get replaced or how old they are getting? This is a very quick way to do it. So you may ask, why is this an Access? Because not a lot of people use Access. I don't know that it's always going to stay in this format. However, it was designed for people that are not ready to keep things like in R or even like an R shiny. And it might move towards that direction in the future, but that's why it's in Access. So it is only to a PC, but we've had quite a few people pick it up. I've had quite a few people actually from outside the FACT network and even outside the US ask for copies of the VEMBU to just try and help keep track of their projects. So with that, I will say thank you. And if you have any questions, please let me know, or you can email the email at the bottom.
Yeah, I'll say that at CERC, we use the VEMBU and I find it like invaluable to just find out random things. Like we've been divvying up receivers to go to different projects. So like, oh, they might get lost. Let's give them all of our old ones so we can put out our new ones on the stuff that we really care about. So we use it a lot. Yeah, I also need to get an updated version. Yeah.
Yes, yes,
like.
yes. It was updated in 2023. So there's what I was showing is the newest version of it. So yeah, it's available.
Any questions you might have?
Go ahead, Amy.
We're dealing with the whole Excel spreadsheet chaos from staff member to staff member and stuff.
Yes.
So we've been, of course, working with all the getting metadata stuff. So what we currently have done, like we can just import those spreadsheets into VEMBU and it'll auto-populate what we've already done, or we're gonna have to go back through historically and put everything in Star.
I should have totally had a slide about this because we went through the same thing, right? So this would be my suggestion. Is pick a point in time, start using the VEMBU from that point forward, and then go back and slowly add your old histories. Access is a little weird in how you import stuff. So some of the stuff won't be directly imported, but it's easier if you pick a point and then you can go back and start with the old. And you can, keep all your stations not retired and add in your deployments and retrievals. It's okay as long as the receiver isn't already deployed with your current stuff. Yeah. And I did it. Like, I just want to be like, I feel for you. Like I did it in, with 6 or 7 years of data, and it took me maybe 2 days, 2-3 days. And actually, it wasn't that terrible.
I would second that too, Joy. I did that as a stupid grad student too, like before I knew stuff. And it doesn't take very long to go through just walking through the deployments and retrievals.
Yeah.
We did that, I think we did it for like a 3-year time period.
Yeah.
Put everything in, we did too.
I feel like it's like a couple of days of pain for a long term
Yeah.
payoff.
Yeah.
You just have to accept.
Yeah.
I'm thinking intern, that's.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Intern, very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I find it like, it's a lot more, user friendly of typing your, data into that than it is formatting the templates, like. If you type, at least the old version, you could just type the date in and the time. However you want it, and it auto formatted to include the annoying T in the middle that all of you forget about all the time. I'm like, no, seriously, there is a T. It's not a colon, it's not a space, it is a T. Yeah, so I mean, and then you just export that and then it goes right into the note.
T is for Twitch that you picked up from.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. Mike, did you have questions, so?
That's more of an existential question than, it's
Alright,
this in general, so.
Oh, it's a little early for
Others might have.
go ahead, Mike. Or Matt.
Oh, no, that's fine. So working for the state of Maine, we use Access. I can tell you our databases look nothing like this. This is much better than what we do. But in thinking about like our whale team that's constantly bringing new people on and deploying VR2ARs. I missed it. Does VEMBU, is there like a quick user guide that might be able to help people that are less familiar with how this process works in the first place that are being brought on?
Yes, asterisks. So there are a series of YouTube videos that actually walk through this entire process. It is based on the older version. But a lot of it is gonna look the same, the field is the same, so we haven't redone the videos to show the newest one. But yeah, there is a series of, I think there's like 10 of them, and it starts with like setting up the
They're
VEMBU,
very thorough.
putting your
Yeah.
Saying.
things in it, and I'm sorry, it's my voice that's in them. But yes, there are videos that you could walk through and do it, and actually. We might have written documentation as well, but I think no, yeah, we've written documentation,
Just like a transcript for
yeah,
the videos.
okay, yeah,
And we just recorded John.
sorry,
The updated version, no.
yeah.
Well, very cool. Thank you. It's awesome.
Yeah, go ahead.
Not a technical question at all, but I'm interested in just how you're creating these videos that you typing. It would be useful for presentations and things.
Oh, yeah, I did them about 3 days ago. It was actually a simple screen capture that's built into a PC. Apparently that's already there that I didn't know. No, I lied. I tried to do that, it didn't work. So these are actually recorded by Zoom. So I just made a meeting with myself and I recorded them on Zoom.
You can also download OBS, it's free software, that's what the gamers use when they're playing, you want to share it with each other. And you can just record what you're doing, it's very slick.
Is it, what is it called?
OBS.
OBS, okay, I'm gonna do that next time.
Max have to do some.
Yeah, find yourself somebody under 20 years old, and ask them to do it. You're off the races, man.
Believe it or not, I have some experience with OBS, so I can also.
I wasn't gonna throw you up there, Bruce, but I was confident that you knew what I was talking about.
Yeah, I was also doing some of this last week and I found a Chrome extension called Vidyard. Though you get a free trial, which I'm currently running. And you can do like unlimited things with the like non-paid for version. It's very limiting, so I wouldn't recommend that. I'd go with those other options.
Yeah.
You said that this is something that you can put on your desktop to
Mhm.
use. We have multiple staff members in different offices.
Do you have a shared server?
We do,
Yeah. That's just using this Quest lab as an example, so we have, one VEMBU for the lab, multiple people might be entering to it. But what they do is they work it from the server, so basically there's an FWC server stored up there, so anyone can bring it down to their desktop. I'll warn you that sometimes, I don't know how good your server is, the FWC server. It can run a little slow when it's moving off of there, but that's how you can have multiple people that could be entering, and that's why there is, we started putting initials on everything. So that you can track who's entering what.
So I haven't done any access databases yet, but I have shared one, but our organization's trying to move to share file base.
Yeah.
So that may be a test.
Oh,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think
try it.
Ours is on a shared server. I haven't moved ours, so we use OneDrive and I haven't
Yeah.
moved it to OneDrive, but I'm the only one that does it, so.
I think I can definitely see where our technicians may be a little bit more excited about this spreadsheet, because they are still to this day using their individual Excel file and then putting it on metadata table for that, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you should start this and be like, all right. We're gonna start this year.
They're not gonna be happy with me at this conference. Oh, this-
They'll be happy when they get that deployment, export deployment.
Yeah.
That's like the
Yes.
reward for this tool is when you hit that and it's just there,
Yep,
Yeah.
and you just hit
filled out.
upload. Great, anything else, Mike, do you wanna?
Sure. So.
Bring it.
This is good, this obviously is really, really cool and a lot of, work and a lot of good work. And I think what my central question is gonna go back to is did this amount of good work need to be done in the first place? I'm actually gonna put my man over there on the spot a little bit as a bad person. In terms of extensibility of this program, right, this is obviously born out of probably frustration with the limitations of what was already provided, which led you or whomever to build something from scratch to go over again and incorporate aspects that were there in the previous VEMBU software and then build that out and then make something extensible from that. And we see with other programs, I don't know, I use like Zotero as my like reference picture where there's the program, that is what it is, and there's the ability to extend it through coding your own plugins, making certain things that way, so you don't have to build from the ground up. And I guess my curiosity is on the Innovacy and further front, is there a view to kind of allow that type of community-based plugin extensibility coding into that software? And I recognize that there's a little bit of trying to capture and kind of say this is our software, but I would have that argue that if you allow that, then you're further going to capture everybody who uses that plugin. That's not going to kind of allow a little bit of deviance. I recognize that obviously it's extensible beyond the notice itself, so that's like a little bit separate, but just I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit. You know, if there's any thought about allowing some sort of framework to allow community creative plugins in probably use dead in that aspect, but in Fathom. You get able to kind of to tap in, but I don't know how open source you need to make the core program, which I imagine probably a little bit of a non-starter at this point, what I've heard otherwise. But yeah, some sort of you're right, like the program, whatever, but the open source API access and importance.
Yeah, currently on the roadmap, we don't have anything as far as very good funding. But we're actually right now, it's good. Kind of being able to clean and validate the data on for that being able to send that off to the I think what we need to also do that side. I think it's that what you want. That will help. Don't have any thought.
I might suggest it. So yeah, I think this shows that there's a lot of appetite for that, to the point that somebody was so frustrated that they found the time or money, maybe it's probably great to build this from scratch. And even if you're thinking in terms of monetizing it or kind of capture that community, I would argue that creating some sort of open API that would allow someone to develop around that and factor in would essentially still be capture of that market. But I may or may not be above your pay grade. I might. I might argue a little bit for that. It's like I recognize that probably Fathom itself not going to be open source, but some sort of open API to developing some sort of program to build other data, other formats or other forms. Like, this is actually something I want to keep track of. I don't want to justify this, as opposed to, I imagine a little bit of a hurdle here was like, it's probably, oh, I already had some all my stuff in view, like I have to do like another one, and it might smooth that over. So
Yeah, I
That's a
will.
Question for you and more of some speech, I guess, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very important, aspect of it, because we talked about, there's things that VEMBU does that Fathom, Fathom has like kind of specific purpose and does some different things. I will say that VEMBU actually predated Fathom by quite a few years, so that's why it was born out of frustration, because we had no documentation system with it, and then, now now we have Fathom, and they're, trying to make it, more available, so again, it's a tool that can be picked up, but it would be great to get it a little bit more advanced.
This is really slick because we're struggling with the same thing, like we want to. Require, or we don't like to require stuff, people to upload their tag spec sheets and the receiver spec sheets so that we can do all that stuff in the back end.
Mhm.
Like as director, I wanna know like, well, how many of my receivers are more than 7 years old? And which ones do I need to start thinking about replacing?
Yeah.
And then, oh, that's sync tags, we can easily join that up and do that on the back end instead of. So I was been talking with Amy about, what are the best ways for us to do this, in a simple, cohesive way.
Yeah.
Like can people opt into sharing their spec sheets with us as a network that where it's hidden. For everybody else, but yeah, we have that information to do these kind of things. The bigger thing too is AR batteries, like we swap receivers all around. And it's like, oh my gosh, when is that release battery gonna die?
Yeah.
And which ones have to be put on the high priority of, no, you need to change that like now.
Yeah.
So I think this is interesting, and I think I'd like to reach out to you, maybe, again, we've talked about maybe doing these things collaboratively as networks instead of each one individually, like how we do this at a larger scale.
Yeah.
Cohesively instead of coming up with solutions piecemeal.
Yeah, let's not reinvent the wheel. I would definitely like to, work together as networks and develop products that would, help all of us.
First, I just want to point out that the OTA compatible nodes do allow you to submit your spec sheets. On further
Yeah, I realized when Joy was talking that I did not mention that in mine, and that is an important part in our. Data standardization is getting the spec sheets, these people do write down kind of. So you mix up your tag, like estimated life, all of this stuff. And then we also have, I don't know how it works. With app, but researchers can also sign something we submitted to Innovacy, and then they will just send, if they ever order specs, Innovacy just sends them right to us, because they have this like blanket permission. Or they can control how much permission they give.
Yeah.
They can just tell Innovacy, you can send us one, or they can say. All the future ones now, which is nice, because I don't think the researchers love having to compile their tag specs and send them to us.
So according to Amy, this was not feasible like a few years ago. This is when we
Okay.
started going right
Yeah.
now, that they, I guess, moved to Fathom and some of the stuff that now it's way more feasible.
Yeah,
But yeah,
We do the same thing. In fact, people can fill out a form, and then we submit it to Innovacy, and then they'll send us tag specs from whoever signed off on it.
yeah, and then even the historical ones, then we are allowed to ask them for those historical ones as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't done that yet. It's been on, the to-do list that keeps, getting longer ahead of that object. But yeah, we're definitely, like, I've been trying to push that a little bit more, just like, hey, how about you send me these and I can help solve those problems you've been having.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely want to move toward being like getting an agreement with Innovacy so that you don't have to do it. I can do it for you.
I would also just point out, like, as a data manager for fact, I can tell you from experience how incredibly useful that system has been. There have been so many times where we've caught estimated tag lives that were reported to be much shorter than what they actually had. So you were actually short selling yourself on the tag life because it would have been a database cut short of the actual tag life that was on the specification sheet. And we've been able to, correspond with the researchers and correct those.
Yeah, I mean, I've recently had somebody who was like, oh, I just realized the tag ID I gave you, it's a 6, not a 9. Can we get that fixed? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Oh, you submitted that 3 years ago. No wonder why you haven't been getting any data. Here's all your data. So if you would have had your spec sheets in, you would have never missed any of that ever. So I just, there's only so much that I know by looking at my eyes and the database can do. So the spec sheets help us check those numbers